Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is my weekly reading vlog. I took a quick trip to New York earlier this week, so I have my I Love New York mug. We went on Wednesday and Thursday for a quick trip to New York City, and I have already shared with you, hopefully. It hasn't gone live yet, but I'm hoping that by that time this video goes live, that video will have gone live. I don't have it ready yet as the time I'm filming this, but I hope that you will have already seen the video of my trip to the Morgan Library and their Jane Austen exhibit, which was my favorite thing about our trip. But we primarily went to New York City for two other reasons. The first reason was I have been wanting to see The Great Gatsby musical since they premiered it a year or two ago, and we just hadn't been able to make it work in our schedule. So we finally were able to go see The Great Gatsby. And also, when we went to New York City earlier this year with the whole family for vacation, we went to the Met. And at that time, we found out that it was cheaper to get a membership to visit the Met. And the membership lasts for a year than it was to get 4 tickets for our family. So that was a no-brainer. But also I was like, okay, well then that means we have to come back this year at some point to go see the Met again. And my sister told me that the Cloisters, which is a museum run by the Met, was also really worthwhile. And it's in the Bronx area. It's north of, you know, the main Manhattan proper. I'm not 100% sure if it's technically in the Bronx there. I'm not really up on my New York neighborhoods, but anyways, it's a little further north, out of the way of everything, but it was definitely worth going there. We thoroughly enjoyed it. So those were our primary reasons for going. The Great Gatsby, the musical, was really good. Even though we saw mostly the understudies, for whatever reason, maybe because it was the middle of the week show, and so the regular stars get their break, it was that the vocalists were still amazing and incredible, top notch. There was actually an awkward moment or two in one scene where I feel like one or the other of the actors forgot their lines, and there were these awkward pauses. I don't know if that actually was the case or if there was some other error, or maybe it was supposed to be like that. I don't know. But overall, it was really well done. I actually didn't listen to any of the music before we went because I kind of just wanted to experience it firsthand in the theater. I didn't think it had any very extremely memorable songs, but it was definitely enjoyable. I also was a little bit concerned, well, not concerned, but I wondered how much they would stick to the storyline. And I think they did a pretty good job. It's been a couple years since I read The Great Gatsby, but my memory is terrible. So there are some scenes that are like emblazoned in my brain, and I know that they included those. And there's some other stuff that, you know, they may have added, I don't know. They may have left some things out, I don't know. But it seemed like they stuck pretty carefully to the storyline. The things that I thought detracted a little bit from it for me were that I think, and I could be wrong because again, it's been a couple years since I read it. I'd have to reread it again to get my impression again. So I could be wrong about this, but I feel like F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing of this story was much more cryptic in a sense. I feel like he didn't lay everything out on the table as far as the characters go and their backstory. Like there's a lot that unfolds as the story goes on and that you kind of uncover as the story goes on. And some things I don't think are ever explicitly stated and spelled out. They're just kind of alluded to or implied. Again, it's been a couple of years, so I could be wrong about this. So if you have read and remember The Great Gatsby better than me, feel free to correct me in the comments. That's just my impression of it. That was not at all like the musical. So I get that they have to take a story that is maybe a little bit more, they had to take this story and make it accessible for a modern audience that's looking to be entertained and not necessarily wanting to go to an English literature class, you know? So I get that to an extent, but they definitely made everything very blatant and impossible to ignore or misunderstand. Like it was all spelled out very clearly. Everything was very obvious. And the first time you meet Jay Gatsby, In the play, which is about, honestly, a good 35% of the way through, I felt like, maybe I could be wrong, but it felt like it was about that far into the play already. And then you meet him. In your first meeting with him, he has a conversation with, why can't I remember his name? The guy, Nick Carraway, who narrates the story. In his first conversation with him, he gives his whole entire backstory, and he explains that he's in love with Daisy and that everything he does is for Daisy and he wants Daisy. And I don't feel like it happened like that in the book. Again, I could be wrong. Memory could be bad. So there's always that. But I didn't feel like it was, I feel like there was still a lot of mystery to Jay Gatsby that was just slowly uncovered as you went through the story. But it wasn't like that in the musical at all. It had a lot of depth, and it definitely did not misunderstand or ignore any of Fitzgerald's themes. They were all right there. And now again, you might get the shallow idea because it was blatant and it was obvious. It wasn't understated. It wasn't under the surface. They didn't leave the metaphors as metaphors. You know, the green light, they spelled out what that was. The billboard with the glass, like they spelled all of that out. They were very obvious about what it was. So maybe that creates a sense of, you know, it being shallow. But they definitely, whoever created the book to this musical, the lyrics and the libretto, etc., they obviously, you know, knew what the themes were. Like, they knew the story very well, and they were portraying the story very well. They were explaining the themes maybe too well, but they got it. Like, it wasn't ignored. I think that they added an element of ultra feminism to the story, maybe highlighted it, that I don't think was there in Fitzgerald's original novel. But again, I don't trust my memory, so I could be wrong on that score, but that seemed like that to me. Anyway, that was The Great Gatsby. We really enjoyed it, had a great time. We also went to the Met, which everybody knows about the Met, right? But I did want to mention the Cloisters, which is not as well known, I don't think, as the actual Met Museum. And that museum is built to look like an abbey or a monastery, and it utilizes architectural elements from actual medieval abbeys, monasteries, churches, etc. from Europe. There was a man in the late 19th, early 20th century who would collect all of these architectural elements like door frames, doors, pillars, posts, windows, like stained glass windows, stones, all of these architectural elements. I don't know where he found them, but he collected them while he was living in France as an artist. And he brought them to the United States for art students to be able to examine up close these examples of medieval European architecture and art without having to go across the ocean. And so he built a museum that he called the Cloisters in New York, I think. But the Met acquired this museum in the early to mid 20th century at some point. And so then that's when they built the Abbey and incorporated all of those architectural elements into it. So it's like you're really walking through a monastery or a convent. It has that same kind of like hushed feeling, the huge thick stone walls, the terraces, the gardens, the rooms where the monks would meet in silent contemplation and prayer, that kind of stuff. There was a crypt there that had some tombs and things from Europe, from a particular family. I forget now where they were from, but anyways, all of that kind of stuff. And some artifacts, some artwork. There were some tapestries that were really cool. My favorite was a series of tapestries about a medieval unicorn hunt, which I thought was really interesting. So tell me in the comments if you think that unicorns were real. I actually thought, until I saw those tapestries, I always thought that unicorn was maybe like rhinoceros or something. Like, it obviously was an animal in existence, but I thought probably it was a rhinoceros. But then after looking at those tapestries, which were not, the scenes they were depicting were not fantastical or magical in any other way. It was like very realistic, and it was an actual unicorn. So I don't know. It's very interesting. And then I read a thing where it said that they had a narwhal's horn, and they said that the wealthy people in Europe would collect these unicorn tusks and would have them in their collection. And modern scholars insist that they are narwhal horns rather than unicorn horns. But I'm a little bit confused how landlocked Europeans would get hold of narwhal horns and think that they were unicorn horns. Like, where would they get them from? So I've not looked into that. Just made me ask questions. Very curious now. And one of those mysteries that I'm just curious about. So that was our trip to New York City. And in my video that hopefully went live earlier this week, I showed what I got at the Morgan Library, but I also just want to show I picked this up. This is a little notebook with one of the unicorn tapestries. I picked that up at the Met because I always like to keep little notebooks like this handy because I like to write things down. So that was our trip to New York. And now yesterday and today, I've just been catching up on all of my filming and editing because next week I know I'm gonna be really busy. So I have to get all of this stuff done this weekend. Once I'm finished with all of that, I need to catch up on some housework. I've been also trying to do like the grocery shopping and the laundry and stuff. So haven't done a lot of reading in the past day or two, but I have read a few more chapters I attended Chrissy's sprints last night, and I read a couple more chapters in The Indifferent Stars Above about the Donner Party. And I'm going to start tomorrow, Sunday, Westering Women by Sandra. That's the one, right? I thought I had a hard copy of it, but I guess I think I had requested it from the library, but I think it came in while I was out of town, and so I wasn't able to pick it up. So maybe I can request it again. Anyway, The Westering Women by Sandra. I'm going to start tomorrow, and I'm reading On the Cliffs at Foxglove Manor by Jaime Wright. That goes for the romantic suspense readathon that's happening this month, and it is the prompt for Jeanette's Jane Reads Christian Fiction Challenge to read a suspense novel. And so that's why I picked it. But also one of my goals is to read Jaime Wright's backlist. And on top of that, so I'm crossing off multiple things on my list here. The other thing is that for the Prairie Trail Readathon, the prompt drought is to read a favorite book or a book by a favorite author. And so this is a book by a favorite author. And I am really enjoying the writing in this one. I don't know that I always have noticed this really great writing in this excellent prose in Jaime Wright's books. I don't know that every book of hers is like that, but this one certainly is. It is really, really very well written, really sets the scene. It's very atmospheric, very spooky, a little creepy at the part of the story where I am right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing how everything gets resolved, but I'm only about 5 chapters in. So we're still uncovering the mystery, and she's just really setting the stage right now for super creepiness. So it is only Saturday. This is the first clip for this weekly reading vlog, and I've already over 15 minutes. That's ridiculous. So I will stop before it gets too much. But the good thing is, next week I'm back to work, teacher training, so I won't have much time to read, and I'll have even less time to film clips. So yeah, it's okay. Probably this will be my last opportunity to make a really long clip, so it's all good. I will keep you updated with what I am or am not able to read as the week goes on, and I'll see you in the next clip. Well, I just went to a local book fair at a coffee shop with my sister and a friend, and I will roll the tape here in a minute so you can see the book fair, and I found some really great local authors. Some of them were Christian, some of them were just clean. There was a lot of fantasy, which is not my typical thing. There were also quite a few authors who wrote on local interest matters, whether like political, because, you know, we're close to Washington, D.C. and multiple federal agencies. So we have, you know, all that kind of stuff. There was a guy who wrote a book about the FBI, and there was a lady who wrote novels based in the CIA, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. We have a lot of that. And it was really fun to see that local flavor of all of the books that were there that were being represented. And a few of those authors I had met at the Lovettsville book fair that I went to last year, which is another town in the area. So anyway, that was so much fun. And I did buy a couple books. So let me show you. So I had bought a book by B.R. Goodwin at the last book fair that I went to last year. And this is her most recent one, Forget Me Not. The one I bought recently was part of her Southern something or other series, where she had, it was set in Georgia, I think. And each book was in a different season. So I read the first one in this series called Southern Snow, and it was set during the winter at Christmas time. So, or I think just the winter. Anyway, it was fun. Yeah, there was Christmas scenes in there. Yeah. So, I do want to read the rest of the series eventually, but I haven't. My sister got the fall one, I think. So I will borrow that from her at some point. But this one, a lot of people have been talking about this recently, and it's gotten some really good reviews. So I am looking forward to reading that. Just a contemporary rom-com set in the South. And then I got this one from a new to me author. Alex Alvin is a pen name, and she is a Russian author, but she moved to the States when she was a teenager. But she writes a mix of things. She has some books that are paranormal. She has some that are kind of like magical realism or fantasy. This is a historical fiction one, and it's set in Imperial Russia. And then I think the lady ends up in France, emigrating from Russia during the time of the Revolution, I think. So that is a time period and a place that really interests me. So it looks really good. So I bought that one. And of course, at both of these, I got signed copies, which is the advantage of buying books at a book fair. So I was very pleased with that. And that was a great way to start off my week here of reading. Well, these look very interesting.
This one is not Russia related.
Okay.
But it's set in Pittsburgh and France.
Now, sort of book that's very popular right now, but it's not really my thing. Well, and there's always the gems that you find. It's so true, right? Like it's my favorite. Okay. Yeah, a little bit. Hello. Yeah.
It basically made us who we are. So.
Right. Yeah. That's really cool.
So it's the first in a series, so it's eventually made up.
With these ones, there's some of my own history woven in. Those are what
And I was paying so much attention to like the dimensions to make sure the book would fit inside. That I did not even see that this was actually from So
Ah.
me was walking away. As soon as I got it, I was like,
romance. Well, I don't like the fantasy's not my genre, anyways. Like, no.
No? What do you guys read?
Historical fiction,
Nice. Do you read any?
or yes, rom-coms. Yeah.
I just feel like, this is not a hit on anyone, but you know, like the Kristen Hannas, where they're like,
Yes.
so
Very
hard.
emotional.
And
Yes, very
it's
heavy.
funny because I have a dystopian series that like I don't read dystopians.
Yeah.
Because it's sad. I'm like, life is sad. I need happiness. I need to smile.
It is Sunday evening, and I have a quiet house to myself for a little bit longer, so I thought I would take the opportunity to come and do a quick little update. So, I read a couple more chapters in The Indifferent Stars Above, the harrowing saga of the Donner Party, and I'm getting to the harrowing part. Part 3, the title of which is The Meager by the Meager Were Devoured. Yeah. And I believe the chapter that I just finished was chapter 8, called Desperation. So yeah, it's fun times happening in this book right here. They are snowbound. And by snowbound, I don't mean that the roads aren't clear and they can't get to school, which is my kind of snowbound, personally. No, by snowbound, I mean that the snow is higher than they are, okay? It's a lot of snow. It's a lot of snow. And it fell in like November and December. Like, this is Laura Ingalls Wilder long winter snow kind of snow. So it's not just a little trifling matter. This is life endangering snow. Hence the desperation. So it's getting to a point where it's very difficult to read, which is saying a lot, because there's been some difficult moments heretofore in this book that were hard to read. So yeah, it's not letting up in that area. So that's that. I am also reading On the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor by Jaime Jo Wright, which, as you probably know, she writes suspenseful books. She gets about as creepy as I want a book to be, okay? So, I mean, it's not like super creepy, I don't think, but I don't read a lot of like thrillers or whatever. So, but it's creepy enough for me. There's like ghosty sort of situations happening here, unexplained things, unexplained characters, lies, secrets, a gloomy manor house on a cliff with a stormy lake. Of course, in Jaime Jo Wright's book, she always has a dual timeline. And so there's like a Victorian era sort of story. And then, well, although it's set in America, so it's not technically Victorian. And then there's a modern era. And the modern girl, her storyline is that she was briefly kidnapped when she was a child and then returned to her parents because she was not able to give the information to her kidnappers that they wanted. And then the story of the girl in the historic timeline is that she comes from a troubled family situation. Actually, they both kind of do. She comes from a troubled family situation. Her mother has died. She apparently had tried to kill herself. So we're still in the process of uncovering the layers of their backstories. At the point where I am in the book, I'm like 40% or something through the book. Two things I want to say about it. The first thing is that I did not realize that this book was set on Lake Superior in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I love the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. My mom grew up there, and I have a brother who still lives there. I've been there on many an occasion. So I'm not like super well versed in the geography or whatever of Upper Peninsula because I haven't gone there often enough as an adult to really get a feel for all of that. But we definitely have a lot of family lore about the Upper Peninsula, the UP, as they say. My brother is definitely 100% a Uper, as they call people who live in the Upper Peninsula, through and through, 100%. So anyway, I'm very familiar with the area and I love that area. So I enjoy that part. One small thing that has been niggling at me in this book is that I feel like, and I don't know, nobody else has mentioned this about her books. I haven't noticed it in any other of Jaime Jo Wright's books,
but there have been some words that have been misused. Repertoire and juxtapose are two of them. Repertoire, I think, has been used twice in a similar context. And I even looked it up because I thought, well, maybe I'm just ignorant and there are other shades of meaning to this word that I am unaware of. So I looked it up, but that did not seem to be the case. So I feel like there are a couple of words that have just been blatantly misused, and I don't get that. I don't understand that. So that's niggling at me a little bit. It's only happened a few times. I've never noticed it in any other Jaime Jo Wright book, so I don't know. Anyway, and to offset the heaviness of those two books, I am very thankful that I started my current buddy read, Westering Women by Sandra Dallas, which I think I mentioned in an earlier clip that I knew I had a hard copy from the library, but I couldn't find it. It was just on a different shelf. So here it is, Westering Women by Sandra Dallas, and I've only read chapter 1 so far. We're reading 3 chapters a day. I will read the other 2 chapters here in a minute, but so far, this is exactly what I need as a companion book to the other 2 books I'm reading. So far, even though, like, our main character, she clearly is coming from a struggling situation that she's hoping to escape by getting on this wagon train going west, even though she seems like kind of depressed at the moment and the story is told from her perspective. So you kind of have that overlaying the narrative. It's still definitely, it's just an easier read. I don't know if it might not be, I don't know how to put this, because I think it's going to deal, like, the journey west is not an easy one, right? There's going to be hardship. There's going to be struggle. I can already see some conflict is being set up among some characters. And like I said, our main character is clearly struggling with some issues in her life at the moment that she's trying to escape. So there are some shadows in the story, but overall, I can tell it's not going to be, I don't think, like a heavy, deeply intellectually challenging sort of read. Pretty much straightforward storytelling, pretty plot driven. I think it's going to be an easy read, which will be a nice counterpart to the other stuff I've got going on at the moment. So that is my reading update for today. I don't know when I will be able to film another one, which is why I took this opportunity. So if I have another chance later this week, I will pop on again and tell you what else I have managed to read. So happy reading. Monday morning, and here we go to a week of teacher training, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day. Had to get up at my usual wakey time of 10 of 6 in the morning to get ready to go. But here I am, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and humid, frizzy hair because it's humid today. It's very humid. And off we go to teacher training, in-service, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be fabulous. It's going to be a fabulous week. Wish me luck. Well, here I am at the end of a long day, and all of my makeup is long gone, and I am stinking tired because I am not used to actually, working. I haven't done much of that this summer. So I am really tired, and I'm fighting back yawns all the way, but I am here to pick up my son from work, but I'm a little early. And there is this cute little courtyard, park, green area near where he works, and I'm going to sit and wait for him there. It might be 10 minutes, it might be half an hour. All depends on how long it takes him to finish cleaning up and doing his various tasks that he is asked to do. So as long as the bugs don't bite me, I'm going to sit on this bench over here and read a book, and I feel like that will be a lovely way to close out my day. I'm going to continue reading The Indifferent Stars Above, and hopefully I don't, scare the people around me with the grimaces and the looks of horror on my face as I read, because it's gonna be grimace provoking. Oh my, it smells heavenly. These flowers smell so good. It's beautiful. I'm gonna sit here on a bench and read. Hello friends, it is Thursday evening and I am here to pick up my son from work. earlier this week when I had to do the same thing, I waited over by the fountain and did a little reading, as you no doubt saw. But tonight, instead of reading, I'm going to be filming. So, life is back to real life. I have been busy with back to school teacher training. And on top of that, I have had some work to do for my job at my church, planning the music ministry team meeting that is happening next weekend. And it is a big meeting, and I'm doing it differently than I've done before. And there's just a lot of parts to it. And so in all of my spare time, I have been working on that. Plus my regular, stuff that I have to do for that job. And then just, regular old daily life. And I taught my piano lessons, which I haven't been doing for the past month. So yeah, I've been back to my normal crazy schedule this week. So I've not read as much. So I'm still in process with the same 3 books that I've been in process with for a little bit now. And that's okay. I'm not complaining. I'm just explaining. What should I start with? Let's start with my Kindle book, which is On the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor. And I'm more than halfway through, but I'm not at a point where I can just finish it and knock it out yet. It's like somewhere between 55 and 60%. So, I haven't been reading that one as much. It's fine. It's good. It's not, I don't think, going to be one of my favorite Jaime Jo Wrights. I love the setting of it. I really love the setting. I'm just not, I don't know. I guess I'm just not as much invested in these characters. It's not that I dislike any of them. And maybe I will get more so as I get further into the story and know a little bit more about them. The one in the modern timeline, I'm actually a little bit more invested in than the historic one, which is unusual for me, but so that's where things stand with that one. And then I am reading The Indifferent Stars Above, and I am on chapter 10, which is a little more than halfway through the book. Okay, there's a gentleman is getting into his car, and he was giving me funny looks. So we're just going to pretend that I'm just FaceTiming somebody or something. So anyway, The Indifferent Stars Above. I am at a really, really difficult place because okay, more than half the people are stranded by the snow. And I'm not talking about little dusting or a couple inches. I'm talking about feet on top of feet on top of feet. Multiple snowstorms stacking on top of each other, each snowstorm dumping feet of snow. So they can't, and this is right as they're trying to go through the Sierra Nevadas, which was difficult to pass in the best of times, impossible with snow. But they have very little food. They have eaten all their oxen, and they're now down to boiling the hides and eating them. They have made very basic shelter in this weather. They're all in a constant state of malnutrition, starvation, and some of them struggling with hypothermia because some of them only had tents that they were living in. Others had actual wooden cabins / shelters, so they were a little bit better. This is right around Christmas time. And then I think it was 18 of the party set out. They fashioned some snowshoes and they set out to try to cross through the Sierra Nevadas to go get help on the other side. And they miscalculated the amount of time it would take. And also they apparently didn't have a compass with them or anything. So they took a wrong turn. They are now stuck in that same amount of snow. And, every few days it snows more, dumps more feet of snow. They had packed meat enough for the time they thought it would take. They've now been gone several days past that. So they are trying to climb these mountains in these homemade snowshoes on top of feet upon feet upon feet of snow. Not dressed appropriately for the weather. I mean, they're dressed warmly, but then they're dressed in heavy clothing, and then that heavy clothing gets wet and then it doesn't dry. And so then they're struggling with hypothermia on top of the starvation that they're experiencing. And every time you think that their story was already hard, you turn the page and it gets harder. And I'm at this point in the story where I'm literally sitting there reading like this. And I'm like, it's so hard to read, but yet I want to, because I want to understand. At this point, I care about these people and I want to understand what it was like for them to the best that I can, having not actually lived through it myself. Most recently, what I was reading was very difficult for multiple reasons. First of all, it was Christmas Day. And even in the, you're in the middle of a situation like that, you understand that it's Christmas Day. Back at the cabins at the camp by the lake where, where part of them are, like 2/3 of them, they managed to mark the occasion. The moms had saved aside a little bit of rations, and I'm talking like beans and I don't know what else, like little bits of dried fruit or something, like meager. And they served it to their children for Christmas. That was how they celebrated Christmas. Out in the middle of the mountains, there was no marking of Christmas. And I don't want to ruin everybody's day, so I'm not even going to say some of the things that are happening at this point in the story, but I will say, so there was a man, Franklin Graves. He was the head of a family, and he has some grown children, a daughter who is married, and younger children. His wife and younger children were back at the cabins at the camp. He and his oldest daughter, who is married, and his other daughter were among the ones trying to go get help. Up until this point in the story, he had been one of the most fit ones. He and his wife, they were used to frontier life. They had already settled on the frontier in Illinois. So now they're moving up, further west. They were hardy. They were fit. They knew pioneer life, right? So they had done really well up until this point. But nobody is immune to the things that they were up against. It's a struggle for survival for anybody. So he succumbed to the struggle. And as he was dying, I can't even imagine. As he was dying, he commanded his daughters to eat him so they would live. I cannot even fathom. And what a terrible choice for them to be faced with when he's gone. That is a level of struggle I am very thankful I have never even been close to. So it's very, very hard to read. To end my discussion of this story on a slightly more positive note, I am loving this author's writing. What's his name again? Daniel James Brown. Loving his writing, loving his research. It's so thorough. This is the kind of nonfiction that I just love because it's so well written and it draws you into the lives and the characters of the people that he's telling you about. But it's so thoroughly researched. So when I told you it was Christmas, right? So he just doesn't just tell you that it's Christmas. He has a small little side discussion, as he's going through the story, which some people may not like this, but I love it, about how the various people represented in this grouping, because they all come from different backgrounds. Some of them are from like New England area. Some of them are, from the frontier area in Illinois and have like German, Irish roots. There were some German families in the group and others. All of them at that stage in history would have had very different thoughts about Christmas and ways of celebrating it. The New England ones would have had a Puritan background and would probably not have celebrated Christmas with anything other than a church service and devotional readings, that sort of thing. Whereas the Germans and some of the others would have celebrated it normally in a pretty big way, in a way that we're more used to thinking of celebrating Christmas. So you have all of these different traditions represented. So he brings it into the story. So you really feel like you're understanding these people who are here in the middle of the Sierra Nevada struggling with this, and also, somehow managing to celebrate Christmas Day to the extent that they can in the way that they would be accustomed to. Well, in the tradition, trying to, you know what I mean. So that sort of thing, I just really appreciate it. I appreciate the writing and I appreciate the research. And I appreciate that he doesn't just give us bare facts of the story. There's a fact. They were celebrating Christmas trapped in the snow. Okay, what does that mean for them? What does celebrating Christmas mean for them? So it's not just a surface story. There are levels and layers, and you really feel like you get a really solid understanding of this group of people and what's happening to them here. Finally, I'm reading Westering Women by Sandra Dallas. I'm reading this with my friend Lauren, and both of us are not enjoying it very much. We are going to read all the way through, at least currently, that's our plan, because we're more than halfway through at this point. We might as well. It's not like it's a difficult read. It's easy to read. But we have a couple of complaints. And I'll just be specific about my complaints, but they're Lauren's too. We've agreed on these things. First of all, the writing is pretty simplistic and basic. It's a very basic narrative style, and almost, I would use the word elementary. Simple sentence structure, basic narrative that doesn't go anything beyond the details. Everything is is told rather than shown. It is not mature, masterful storytelling. Also, the characters are very flat and one-dimensional. Lauren used the word stereotypical, and that's so true. The treatment of all of the issues in the story is very basic, one-sided, completely lacking in nuance, and it's simplistic. Everything is boiled down to the simplest narrative. And now this is not a Christian novel, okay? So there's that. So one does not expect to find solid theology in a secular book. There's that. However, a group of people leading this wagon train are Christians. And I think that she based it on a historic incident. So there are two pastors, and then one of the pastor's wives, who is the sister of the other pastor. So they are leading the wagon train. And so obviously, because you have that setting, it's part of the story, right? Their religion is part of the story. And part of the requirement for being in this wagon train is that the women be Christians. And so these women are supposed to be Christians. So it's a part of the story, so it comes up. It's not a Christian novel, but that sort of stuff comes up. The problem is the theology is terrible. And I'm not going to go into details. I'm just going to tell you it's terrible. The theology is bad. Bad theology. Okay, anyway, so that's that. That's enough. This will probably be my final clip for the week. I have a very extremely busy weekend coming up, so I will not have time to film anymore. Definitely, I may not even have time to edit this, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, in order to get this up on Sunday morning, I don't think I will be able to film anymore. So I'm going to close out here and say that it's been a pretty good week in spite of the busyness, that I look forward to finishing Westering Women soon. And even though I'm busy, I will have some time in the car this weekend. So I'm hoping that I will finish on the cliffs of Foxglove Manor and make decent headway in this. So hopefully in my next report, I will have those finished and will be started on some more books for my Prairie Trail readathon, because there are some others I want to get to for that before August is over. So that is what I have got for this week. Thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments how you are doing with the Prairie Trail readathon. We've been chatting a lot in the Discord server, and that's fantastic. Let's keep that up. But I'm also curious what you, I just want in your comments what you have been reading. If you read any of the books that I'm reading, just let me know, and let's just keep talking about all of those Prairie Trail books, and I will see you next time. Bye.